Glass shatters behind me. Someone screams. 3 seconds later, a man's wrist is bent backward against a marble reception desk, and the gun he was holding is already in my hand. Nobody in that lobby knew who I was 5 minutes earlier. They just knew I was too quiet for the job. My name is Mara. That morning, I was just another applicant in a stiff blazer sitting in a hallway that smelled like fresh paint and old money. 8 years ago, I was in the Marine Corps. Force Recon. I don't say that out loud anymore. People ask questions I don't want to answer, and some nights I still don't have good answers for myself. Now I needed a job, any job. My daughter needed shoes for winter, and my savings had a bottom I could already see. Security guard. Corporate tower. 40 stories of steel and glass sitting on top of the city like it owned it. I sat with my hands folded, spine straight, eyes moving, doors, exits, the guard station, the cameras, old habits. Nobody noticed. That was the point. 3 other applicants sat near me. Big men. Broad shoulders. One of them flexed his arms just sitting there, like the interview was a way-in. They talked about gyms and tactical courses they'd taken on weekends. I said nothing. I'd learned a long time ago that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. Then the elevator opened, and Daniel Ashcroft walked out. He owned the company. Forbes had called him a genius. His employees called him something else behind his back: cold, distant, exhausted. What nobody printed was this: Daniel hadn't slept through a night in 2 years. Someone had been threatening him. Letters, calls, no name, no face, just fear that followed him home and sat at the foot of his bed. He needed a guard he could trust. He just didn't know what trust looked like. He looked at the row of applicants first. The big men, straightened up like soldiers at inspection. He nodded at them, almost approving. Then he looked at me, a woman, quiet, unremarkable in his eyes. "This isn't a waiting room for interns," he said, checking his watch. "You're here for the security position?" "Yes, sir," he almost laughed. "You," he said, "against what might come through that door?" "No offense, but I need muscle, not." He paused, searching for a polite word. "Not someone's mother." The hallway went quiet. A few staff members smirked. One of the big men chuckled under his breath. "I didn't argue. I never do. Arguing gives away information about you, and information is the one thing I learned to guard with my life." "I understand," I said. But then, his assistant leaned in and whispered something. His face changed. "There's been another call," she said. 10 minutes ago," he said today. Daniel's jaw tightened. The genius businessman looked, for just a moment, like a frightened man in an empty house. He turned back to me, irritated that I'd witnessed it. "Sit, wait. We'll finish this later," he said, and walked off like the conversation never happened. I sat back down, but something in me had already shifted gears. Old instincts don't ask permission. I watched the lobby doors. I watched a man in a gray hoodie linger too long near the loading entrance, then leave, then come back. He wasn't smoking. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He was counting something, footsteps, maybe, or seconds between camera sweeps. No one else noticed him. I did. I found a junior guard near the desk. "That man in gray," I said quietly. "He's circled the building twice, same jacket, different hat." The guard blinked at me. "Lady, we get weird people outside all the time. Not people counting camera blinds." He laughed it off. Told me to relax. Told me the interview room was down the hall if I wanted to wait there instead of hoovering. I didn't move. An hour passed. The big men were called in one by one. Each interview took 20 minutes. I heard fragments through the door. Questions about gym routines, about handling unruly guests, about whether they could look imposing in a uniform. Nobody asked them what they'd actually do if a gun came through that door. When it was finally my turn, Daniel didn't even look up from his desk. "Tell me why I should hire someone who looks like she'd need protecting herself," he said, flipping through my application without really reading it. "You don't have to hire me," I said. "You just have to ask yourself one question." He looked up, mildly annoyed. "And what's that?" "How many of the people you've talked to today have actually been shot at?" Something flickered behind his eyes. Not offense. Curiosity. But he shut it down fast, the way powerful men do when they don't want to admit they're rattled. "Interesting answer," he said flatly. "We'll be in touch." That was corporate for no. I stood, thanked him, and walked back out to the lobby to collect my bag. That should have been the end of it. A polite rejection. A quiet drive home. Explaining to my daughter, again, that this month might be tight. But the day wasn't finished with me yet. Because 5 minutes later, the radio at the front desk crackled with a jammed side door. Then the power flickered, just once, just long enough to matter. Then a bank of monitors near the guard station went black, one after another, like something was being disabled on purpose. The junior guard who'd laughed at me went pale. "Hey," he said, voice cracking. "Hey, that's not normal, right?" "No," I said. "It's not." I told him to lock the interior doors leading to the executive floor. He hesitated. He wasn't authorized to make that call. I told him again, sharper this time, and something in my voice made him move without asking why. Then the lobby glass didn't shatter by accident. The man in gray came through it fast, a pistol raised, shouting Daniel's name. Chaos erupted, screaming, people diving for cover, chairs overturned, someone's coffee cup shattering across the marble like a second explosion. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. Muscle memory took over before my mind caught up. 3 seconds. That's all it took. I crossed the floor low and fast, redirected his arm upward and away from the crowd, and put him on the ground before he understood what happened. The gun skittered across the marble and spun to a stop against the reception desk. The room went silent, except for someone's shaking breath, and the low hum of the broken glass door swinging on its hinge. I pinned his arm with my knee, checked he had no second weapon, and looked up. Daniel stood frozen by the elevator, staring at me like he was seeing a different person entirely. "Who are you?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. His assistant had already pulled up my old application on her tablet, the one line I'd tried to keep small at the bottom of the page. United States Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance, 2013-2017. No one in that lobby called me someone's mother again. Police arrived within minutes. They cuffed the man in gray and walked him out past a lobby full of people who couldn't stop staring at me like I'd grown a second face. In a way I had, the one I usually kept hidden. It turned out the man was a former employee Daniel had fired 2 years earlier, over a cost-cutting decision Daniel didn't even remember making personally. A line item on a spreadsheet. A name he'd never learned. But for that man, it had been the start of losing everything. His apartment, his marriage, his grip on reality. The threats hadn't come from some faceless enemy. They'd come from a wound Daniel didn't know he'd left behind him. Daniel sat on the edge of a chair that used to look powerful under him. Now he just looked like a man who almost lost everything and hadn't noticed how alone he'd become long before today. "I judged you in 10 seconds, he said, still shaking slightly. "You saved my life in 3. "You judged what you could see," I said. "That's not the same as what's true." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question I didn't expect. "Why didn't you tell me, in the interview? Why not just say what you were?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "You'd already decided who I was before I sat down." He didn't have an answer for that. Most people don't, once you say it out loud. He didn't just give me the job. Over the next few weeks he asked me to rebuild his entire security program. Not with muscle, but with people like me. People who'd been overlooked because they didn't look like anyone's idea of strong. Veterans transitioning out of service with nowhere steady to land. Single parents who'd learned to stay calm under any kind of pressure, because they had no other choice. Quiet people the world stopped noticing a long time ago, the same way it almost stopped noticing me. We interviewed dozens of them together, Daniel and I. He started asking different questions this time. Not about gyms, not about looking imposing. He asked what they'd survived, what they noticed that other people missed, what they did in the 3 seconds before everyone else even understood something was wrong. Within a year that lobby held a plaque by the reception desk. The Ashcroft Foundation for Overlooked Protectors, scholarships, job placements, and quiet second chances for veterans transitioning home, especially the ones who go unnoticed the way I almost did. Daniel started sleeping again, he told me once, almost embarrassed to admit it. Not because the threat was gone, because for the first time in 2 years he trusted the person standing at his door. My daughter got her shoes that winter. And so much more than that. A mother who came home standing a little taller, who didn't have to shrink herself in waiting rooms anymore, who finally stopped translating her own worth into words powerful men could understand. People will decide who you are in the first 3 seconds they see you, but who you really are only shows up in the moment it matters most. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. There are more hidden heroes out there, waiting for someone to finally look twice.